Welcome to Anything Cricket, Let's Talk. This evening, we are having a look at West Indies cricket in its present state, what has transpired so far for the year, and even more of what, looking at the future, immediate, and in some cases, the longer term. I am Wayne Holder, your host for this show, and with me is regular co-host Ayana Holder, and this time we are introducing for the very first time on Anything Cricket Let's Talk, all the way from Ontario in Canada, Mr. Stephen Daniel. May not send shockwaves through the cricket world. Stephen is, I would venture to say, a diehard West Indies cricket fan and a concerned West Indian regarding the state of West Indies cricket. So let's first of all get a welcome from Stephen Daniel. And of course, Stephen, just a brief outline of who is Stephen Daniel and what makes him suitable to be a guest on Anything Cricket Let's Talk.
Well, good night, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for inviting me, Wayne, to the show. Stephen Daniel, just very short on the cricketing resume. So, of course, I played a bit of school cricket and so on, but not to a really high standard. So I'm not bringing that to the table. I am a professional IT resource, independent. I love cricket. So I go back to the periods where, I would listen to cricket on the transistor radio where we were taking our thrashing in Australia. I moved to Canada in the mid-'80s, and since I've been here, I tried everything to stay in touch, whether it was getting cable, buying expensive shortwave radios, just to stay in touch with the game as much as I can. So what I'm hoping we can discuss is, to some extent, is how we can go forward and how we can try to improve the state of cricket, because there's always a lot of talk about what is, how bad we are, how great we were. But I'm hoping that tonight we can spend some time on, some topics that we think might add to an improvement down the line. So that's Stephen Daniel in short.
Thank you, Stephen. Ayana, the year in review, I think that it says a lot about West Indies cricket and the state of things. Of course, we had a year where we had decent returns in the test arena. Coming down to the end of the year, we had not lost a test match nor a series, something that we took some great pride in. We also had an extended white ball season, unprecedented number of matches on the regional, domestic circuit and in our international season. And we also had developments with changes to selection panels. We had a change to white ball captain at one point. Then we had the resignation of a white ball captain and the head coach. We, of course, had that disastrous outing in the T20 World Cup. And then it all came to a conclusion with a devastating loss, debilitating loss in the two-test series with Australia. So your take, though, just take us back through the year from your perspective and your take on where we are at the moment.
The end of this year probably sums up West Indies cricket on a whole, to be quite honest. We defeated England at home, which is basically a norm. West Indies is always very good against England at home. We defeated Bangladesh, who we always basically overcome at home in test matches, and went to Australia, who are a powerhouse at home. So the result did not really surprise me. However, on the white ball circuit, the World Cup showing was disappointing. And even as we look ahead, West Indies are basically fighting to be one of the automatic qualifiers for the next 50 over World Cup. And we do remember that West Indies had to go through the qualifying stages the last in 2020 going into the 2019 World Cup, I think it was, that we had to
Yes, it
qualify.
was. Yes, it
That
was.
that we had to qualify. So as we look ahead, you know, many times the names and the faces change, but really and truly the fundamental issues in governance and administration still remain. So there isn't really a lot to be optimistic about, if I'm being honest.
Stephen, you, as you said, interested in discussing the way forward and the improvements. Now, Ayana spoke about the fundamental issues. What do you perceive to be those fundamental issues are most affecting the development of West Indies cricket?
That's a huge question. There are so many issues. I think that we need to try to compact it. So I'll try to respond by eliminating certain things and addressing others. So I won't talk about the psychological, the emotional, the motivational, the workload management. Those are things that, you know, coaches and others can probably would definitely be more qualified to speak on. But I think even somebody like me who is nothing more than a fan can look at certain things that we keep doing wrong and suggest certain things that might work and wonder why we aren't doing it. So for me, the way that we are or we should be approaching the needs of the cricket team, even though analogies are dangerous things, I tend to look at it as preparing for an exam. And as we recall back in the day, we would prepare for the exams, especially those of us who were in sciences and so on. We do the material in school, and then to prepare, we would try to do as much as we can to be as similar to what we're going to have to go through during the actual exam. I remember those little past papers that we would use. And one of the things that I think is core to us getting better is something that, you know, I like to call it the science of simulation. And if you think about it, there's not too many things that people do really well without having simulating what they have to do in reality. So I think the training that we're doing doesn't often take the players where they need to be. So as I've said to you many times, I think we often send squads that are unprepared or underprepared for these tournaments. If you look at what happened to us when we went to New Zealand, and we got some fiery fast bowling. When you look at what happened when we went to Australia recently, I don't think that especially the batsmen, are being well prepared for the tours that they have to take. And I think one of the big differences is, unlike the 70s and 80s where we had, you know, the 2, 3, or 4 or 5 matches to prepare, that's not happening. So I think we need to take a big step in terms of the way that we prepare the teams going forward. You know, I can say more about that, but the cornerstone of what I think needs to be done is just the way that we prepare the teams needs to be changed.
Ayana spoke about the governance, administrative issues, the personalities involved without changing fundamental structures.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come in to the scheme of things? Because you seem to lean quite heavily in the area of player performance. How important is that support coming from the management, the administration?
That's job one. That's job one. And the challenge, which blows my mind, is in understanding why that move, none of the recommendations from the commissions that we've had have been taken seriously. If we look at one of the countries that I think is an excellent template for us to follow, New Zealand. So I believe it was 1995, New Zealand had a HUD committee set up to examine, what was going on with the structure of the cricket. And a couple of the findings mirror very, very, very similar to what we're going through. So there are 6 provinces in New Zealand, and each had representatives for the national board. And the commission decided that, in their opinion, it would be best to limit the size of the board and have professional members on the board. So today, for example, New Zealand has a board which consists of about 9 members, 5 of whom are women, 4 are men, and the provincial boards, which existed before, voluntarily decided essentially to remove themselves. So that was 1995, and this is 2022. So that gives you an idea of how long we've been doing the same thing with the 6 territorial boards, 2 representatives, the president and vice president. That hasn't changed for almost 30 years. So unless that changes and we get the right people in place, so like I said, if you look at the background of some of these members of the board, they're women, they're people who are professionals. Some of them have played cricket, some of them have not played cricket, some of them have played at a national level. But what they're bringing to the table is a group of skills which allows them to promote, understand first what's needed in New Zealand cricket, and point a way forward. And the other huge similarity between New Zealand and us is the size of the population, roughly 5-point-something million. And I think if we were to look at a country that's doing it well in terms of the level of performance, the number of times that they reach semifinals and finals, I think you can't look at a better example, a better template than New Zealand. But like I said, the cornerstone of that was the fact that those members of the provincial boards decided that the best way forward for the country and for cricket in New Zealand was to remove themselves and allow this new recommended setup, the new board structure to go forward.
Ayana, the territorial boards, the territorial authorities, Stephen, talk about the provincial boards there in New Zealand, which is equivalent to the territorials, the 6 territories that we have. How much of a part do they essentially have to play in going forward in this thrust for improvement?
Well, I believe that the persons involved, who involved in the territorial boards, who have been appointed to be directors of West Indies cricket, must be logical and not emotional, because having power is basically, you're in control. But as Stephen highlighted, New Zealand made the change in 1995, and almost 20 plus years later, they started to really see results in New Zealand cricket, having gone to the World Test Championship final, the 50 over World Cup final. They have seen progress in New Zealand cricket, and New Zealand are undoubtedly, in all formats, one of the best teams in the world. And that took time, but it also took an evaluation and an overhauling of the governance structure in order to make things better. Contrastingly, West Indies in the same 1995 started to go on the decline. And I was born in 1995, and 27 years later, we are at rock bottom, and some people are even saying that we're even lower than rock bottom. So obviously, the existing system and structure is not doing anything for West Indies cricket. The last time we won something was in 2016, 6 years ago. And we're in a position now where we can't even get into the full competition. We are playing to qualify like an associate team. And if a board is going to be accountable, then I think these are valid questions. We need to evaluate what are we doing. We also need to look at the reports on the ways that some professionals have suggested to make things better. But when you're dealing with the personalities involved, persons don't want to let go because it means that certain, I guess, perks might be lost. But if you really care about West Indies cricket and the reports make sense and are helping us to get back to where we know West Indies cricket can be, then I think that it should be employed.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I can just jump in here for a second, I think the very nature of our setup almost dictates that it's almost the territorial nature of the board means that there's a very protectionist approach, I think, that a lot of the boards will take. Whereas I think what the New Zealanders recognize and they've embraced is we're not talking about any specific province. We're talking about what's best for West Indies cricket. So similarly, we shouldn't be talking about what's best for Barbados or what's best for the Leewards or the Windwards or Jamaica, etc. What structure can we put in place that's best for West Indies cricket? The decline has continued for year after year after year. There's a couple of blips where we might win an ICC championship, we might win a T20 World Cup. But if you look at the sustained performance, it's been poor. And we just need to admit and face the truth that it has been poor and it continues to be poor. And unless something is done about it, it will continue to be poor. And I think, if I may add here, is that one of the things that people like you, yourself, Wayne, and Philip, I think as journalists, I think there's definitely a place for journalists to play to hold a lot of these board members' feet to the fire, because we keep hearing about reports and we keep hearing about investigations. And then when it comes to really talk about the results and what's happened and performance and metrics and how we're improving, we hear absolutely nothing. I remember not too long ago, I saw some interviews and where they were talking about the CPL cricket, for example. And it blew my mind that some of the key representatives of West Indies cricket weren't talking about what the CPL had done in terms of improving cricket in the West Indies. They were talking about things like tourism, taxi drivers, hotel accommodation. I mean, that's all good, and it's great for the Caribbean economy, the West Indies economy. But if you have a tournament that's been done for 10 years, at the end of 10 years, you should be able to come to report to the people of the Caribbean what has CPL done for the Caribbean from a cricket perspective. And all I'm hearing is the tourism. And then one person actually went so far as to say, this is a platform and we will be able to get some of our players into the more recognized tournaments such as IPL. And that was supposed to be an achievement. But I didn't hear anything about strengthening West Indies cricket. And these are the kind of things that get people like myself very upset, because even if we develop a Hetmyer and he goes on and he makes, several $1 million and he plays for the West Indies, and I'm not calling Hetmyer out, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that type of experience. So a player performs, CPL or any kind of regional tournament and then makes it quote unquote big. But in terms of raising the standard of West Indies cricket in whatever format, T20, ODI, Test cricket, what is the board doing? And I would say, unfortunately, not much.
Ayana, back to you. The present regime came into office on a platform of cricket first. and West Indians first, as far as appointments of key personnel. How effective has this regime been, and where can this really? How far can this policy and arrangement take us?
Well, it's funny that you asked how far can this take us, because on reflection, the testing has done reasonably well, decent. However, the white ball teams, we must admit, appear to have regressed. And I believe that you need to acquire the best skills available. If the best skills available are West Indian, sure. But I believe that the best skills must be acquired. And I mean, you know, when you're in election mode and you're trying to win the votes and the confidence of the boards, then you try to feed them as much as possible in the areas that you think are going to make them happy. But at the end of 2022, upon the resignation of Phil Simmons, and with all that lies ahead, I mean, next year we have the 50 over World Cup. As I said earlier, we are still battling to see if we're going to be an automatic qualifier. And in 2 years' time, we have the 2024 World Cup. And over the last 6 years, we've noticed that there has been a lot of continuity in our progression and preparation for the global tournaments. And it it basically climaxed this year as West Indies were not in the real World Cup. So and again, I believe there's going to be another election coming up sometime soon, whether it be this year or next year. And the position we find ourselves in most of the time is that a president will take over, the selection panel may change, and all of a sudden, all of the wares in the cupboard are brand new. But you had some before who were working for you, but you bring a whole new set where they now have to get familiar with the surroundings. Some of them are inexperienced, so they're now learning the game, and we're back at square one. So again, a governance issue, continuity. Is West Indies cricket really at heart, or is the individual's goals really at the forefront for them, or what they want to do instead of what is really good for West Indies cricket?
When you mentioned the media, of course, you mentioned the actual managers of the cricket, but then there are other stakeholders. For instance, we've been struggling in the area of sponsorship, and of course, we know the importance of financial resources, something that that has been lacking in West Indies cricket. How do we go about achieving the goal of acquiring those resources with investment, let's say, from the various stakeholders, including governments in the Caribbean?
Well, I think, first of all, we know that our governments themselves are quite cash-strapped. And I think one of the things that I'm not on the board, but the board needs to do is to think, to use the cliche, outside the box. So any investor, advertiser is only going to most likely put money into product if they see a return, right? So let's say you are in the place of I don't know, a Massey or some massive corporation, Caribbean corporation, and you've seen what just transpired in Australia, right? How willing are you going to be to pour the needed funds into West Indies cricket if the product that you're sponsoring doesn't seem to be what you expect? So I think one of the things that we have to do is raise the quality of the product. And I think the board could probably get funding from some sources that they haven't tapped if they were to convince people, fans like myself, for example, that there was a workable plan in place to improve West Indies cricket, and there was 100% transparency in where the funding is going. So I did some basic arithmetic numbers here. So let's say we could find 2,500 people in the diaspora who wanted to support West Indies cricket at $15 a month, whether they paid it in one shot, two shots, monthly, or whatever. And they did that for 1 year. And assuming, some might be Canadian, some might be from the UK, but we just treat it in terms of US dollars. We got just 2,500 at $15 a month. That would bring in 450,000 US dollars. If you multiply that, that's almost $1 million. And if we were to bump that number up by another 500, so 3,000 across the world who love West Indies cricket and were, willing to go in their pocket and contribute $15 a month, that would balloon or jump to 540,000 US dollars, over $1 million. My point is that I think people like myself and others who don't necessarily live in the Caribbean right now, or even people from within the Caribbean itself, would be willing to put, like, for most people, $15 is not going to be onerous, whether it be 20, 25 or whatever. But I think people will only do that if they are convinced that the money is being well spent and that the board is taking us in the right direction. So I don't think it's all about government. I don't think it's all about big company or corporate sponsorship. I think we need to be innovative in the way that we go about trying to get some of the funds and things that we bring to West Indies cricket.
And by this policy, people generally expect to get something back for the investment. What would be the expectations?
Funny enough, I've had this discussion with a couple of my buddies, and that's the number one point that they raise. Like, what am I getting back for my $15? Whereas for me, I'm thinking, well, it's $15 towards rebuilding West Indies cricket. So I would be less concerned about getting something back. But let's say we go down that road. I think something in terms of discounts, something that we can afford, right? Or the board can afford, something in terms of those things like discounts on games, maybe kits, that kind of thing. And some of the people I've had this discussion with have spoken about, let's try to do like the lottery thing, where I don't know how feasible that is from an accounting point of view, from a tax point of view. So I'm not going on that road. People who are more knowledgeable in that area could probably address some of those issues. So you collect, I don't know, 1 million, and there's a prize of, I don't know, somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 to the winners. I don't know if that's workable, but I think if we do have to give something back, and people demand and are only going to promote it if they're getting something back, then we would have to explore those type of options in terms of financial reward or something that benefits a cricket fan in terms of, like I said, discounts on tickets, or maybe a pass in the VIP stand, or something that's beneficial to the cricket fan. What the answers are, I'm not sure. I mean, we'd have to put people who are far more brilliant than I am to come up with the best suggestions. But the key point that I'm trying to make is that we cannot just look at gate receipts, because we know that the gates aren't making any money. And in terms of broadcast rights, we get money when we're hosting. And what are people going to be willing to pay for your broadcast rights if your product on the field is not an excellent product, right?
Well, Ayana, the cricket with all these problems, the cricket is still ongoing, and the cricket has to go on, and we still have to find ways and means of adapting to best utilize whatever resources we have at the moment. The World Test Championship continues early next year. I think it was mentioned that the 50 over World Cup is also coming up next year. In the immediate short term, what are the what methods would you suggest for the well immediate improvement, short term improvement for the West Indies team to help the team to become more competitive in the short future?
That's a pretty tough question, to be honest. But from my recollection, West Indies' next international fixture is a full tour of South Africa, where we play Test, ODIs, and T20Is. We're yet to find out who will be the white ball captain, as Nicholas Pooran resigned. But I believe that after the Christmas break, the players should start their preparation, most likely in Antigua under their new head coach. We are also yet to find out who that will be as well. But I believe we should have a red ball and a white ball coach to specialize between the different two type formats. And obviously, we know going to South Africa, you will be facing the likes of Nortje, Rabada, and Gidi. You know, we will be looking forward to facing PS. So our preparation should mirror the conditions that we're likely to go to face in South Africa, and just try to be as prepared as possible to put up a decent fight in South Africa. This year overall has been a pretty average year. Craig Brathwaite, the captain, led from the front, the only player to score 2 centuries. Young Tej Narain gave a good account of himself in Australia. That's pleasing to see. And we expect the likes of Blackwood, Kyle Mears, and Nkrumah Bonner, I think, is a player who we might need to look a little more at, because he might not be suited in the fast bowling conditions. I think that we need to analyze how best to utilize our resources. This is probably about the 3rd or 4th time that he had been struck in a game and concussed. So I don't think that the fast bowling conditions suit him very well. And that's also something else that I think we need to look at in terms of selecting horses for courses. There might be another batsman who does better in fast bowling conditions compared to Nkrumah Bonner. But just stuff like that, preparing your guys to be best able to face the conditions and the challenge ahead.
Guys, we are really we have run out of time, more or less. I know, Stephen, you barely scratched the surface of all that you would want to say, and here is extending that invitation to have you back on Anything Cricket Let's Talk sometime very soon to follow up on this discussion. And as we go into the Christmas season, I guess there's going to be a short lull in cricket activity. But like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, and I know it only whet my appetite, and I'm sure that of a number of our viewers. So,
Wait, before you wrap up, can I just say one last thing?
Of course.
Yeah. So what the point that Ayana really so beautifully, I think, kind of underscores some of the points that I'm trying to make. So when we say we're preparing the team, let's say, to go to South Africa, right? We're preparing them in Antigua, let's say. I don't know what the itinerary is going to look like for for South Africa. But I remember I shared a video within the chat that we have recently, where I showed the video that Marnus Labuschagne made, where he was preparing for his tour in South Asia, where he had this rubber strip and he had these strips of aluminum and he had this ball and he was preparing for the skidding of the ball, the turning of the ball. But the point that I'm trying to make is that and this was in his house, right? He was trying to simulate the conditions that he was going to face when he went to South Asia. And this is a guy with an almost 60 test average, right? So, but the simulation is key. So I'm saying that even if our players practice in Antigua hard, right? As hard as they can be, but they're not simulating the types of pitches that they will see in South Africa, they're not going to be any further ahead. So I think we need to find ways to use the engineers that we have who love cricket. We use the people at the University of West Indies and Augusta. We can't afford the drop-in pitches and all of that kind of stuff. We simply can't afford it, right? But find ways that we can prepare, whether it be the synthetic or a mix of synthetic and real pitches, that will help the guys prepare for what they're going to see in terms of bounce, in terms of pace. Because you can practice on a medium to slow surface, and then when you get there, it's totally different. As much work as you've put in, you're not going to be prepared to face what you're actually gonna see, right? So I think the point I'm trying to make is that we have to look at this preparation angle a lot more seriously than working in the nets and sending them off to South Africa or Australia or wherever.
Well, that is, I said, some great suggestions and some food for thought for all of us. And we would, once again, I would like to say thank you, Stephen. Expect to have you back on the show sometime very, very soon. Ayana, thank you also for your contribution. And as I close out this episode of Anything Cricket Let's Talk, let's wish all our viewers and all our supporters the best for the season, and of course, an improved new year for West Indies cricket and prosperity to all. Once again, thank everyone, and
thank you.
Till next time, this is it for Wayne Holder closing out Anything Cricket Let's Talk.